our panelists and some of the participants who are joining us shortly. So before we begin, why not we get to know each other? So you can introduce yourself. Am I? Yeah. So, Assalamualaikum. I am Javed and I'm doing my bachelor's in environmental sciences from Bahia University. Assalamualaikum. My name is Maham Gulzar and same I'm doing bachelor's from Bahia University in environmental sciences. Assalamualaikum. My name is Anusha Khan and I'm from Bahia University and I'm doing environmental sciences. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Shamin Masood. I am doing bachelor's in computer arts from Fatma Jinnah Women University. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. I am Ibn Batul Jafri and I am doing computer arts from Fatma Jinnah Women University. Assalamualaikum. My name is Vinay Maman. I am also doing bachelor's in graphic designing from Fatma Jinnah Women University. Assalamualaikum. I am Ahmad Fatma and I am doing my bachelor's in computer arts from Fatma Jinnah Women University.
Assalamualaikum. I am Shafkat Aziz. I work in Personal Poverty Alleviation Fund.
Okay, so our panelists have arrived and now we are going to start the event. Good morning, everyone. I'm Zainab, Naeem, and on behalf of SDPI, I greet you all a very warm welcome. The seminar is organized to commemorate the International Arts Day, which is celebrated every year on 22nd of April. And the theme is Invest in Our Planet. Since 1990, every year this day is celebrated with the purpose to educate, to diversify, and to create a worldwide awareness regarding the environmental movement. So SDPI in this regard conducted a digital art contest in which university students participated from all over Pakistan. And today we will be announcing the winner after the event. So before that, I'm going to introduce the panelists. We have been joined by some incredible panelists. We have Ms. Aisha Khan. She is the head of Mountain and Glacier Protection Organization and Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change. Then we have Mr. Nadeem Ahmad. He's a policy analyst and climate and energy attaché at Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Am I correct, sir? Then we have Ms. Rina Saeed. She's chair Islamabad Wildlife Management Board. And our fourth panelist is Mr. Rehan Khilji, Manager Environment and Social Management, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Welcome. We'll also be joined by Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director SDPI, for his closing remarks. So without further ado, I would like to pass over to our first panelist, Ms. Aisha Khan. I would like to know, ma'am, what do you think about the theme of this year's Earth Day, Invest in Our Planet? And do you think that we are heading in the right direction? Over to you.
Thank you. Want me to use this or? Okay, thank you so much. I think for a person like me, because long before I became an environmentalist or a climatologist, I was a naturalist. So I celebrate Earth Day every day of my life. And the work that I do is directly related to the environment. And long years ago, about more than 20 now, when I started this work, my desire was driven by the realization that if we don't protect and preserve the natural resources, if our infinite demands on finite resources continue the way it is growing, then we will have some dire consequences. And I think today we are seeing the result of all that. We are seeing that our patterns of production and consumption are not in sync with nature. Our lifestyles are not in sync with nature. So it's become alarming now. And I think science has throughout been trying to remind us that we are on the wrong trajectory. We need to course correct, and we have not listened. Unfortunately, following the climate conversations and negotiations, I think it's an irony that these have been the longest ever. I mean, can you imagine conversations that started in 1972 and then they became formalized during the Earth Summit in 92? So today, in a way, we're commemorating the 50th anniversary. And 50 years later, we're nowhere closer to a solution. We're still negotiating about who will do what, when, how. So I think that, it's a wake-up call. The sixth assessment report is a wake-up call. It has brought the peak emission time down by several decades. Instead of 2030, 40, now it's 2025. So I think all of us need to realize that we need to do something at our individual level. We need to change. And I think the significance of this day cannot be lost on anyone who has a rational and scientific point of view, because you can now see it happening all around. And the sooner I think we start responding to it in a personal capacity, as well as with a deeper, I think, sensitization. Because making lofty declarations like we do on these days and then going back and reverting to our old lifestyles is not what we need to do. I think we need to be kind to the planet, and we need to live in harmony with nature. So that's what I have to say for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha. And I think that was a very inspirational start to the conversation. And I particularly loved what you said, that we need to celebrate Earth Day every day, not just on one day. So with this, I would like to move to our next panelist. I wanted to ask that, what do you think about the net zero emission target that needs to be achieved by mid-century? We need to keep the global temperatures below 1.5 degrees. Do you think it's practically, feasible if we'll be able to achieve net zero, specifically the developing countries?
Thank you. Well, we have the climate debate for 50 years. The net zero life is short. The net zero concept came, I think, in 2014, just before the Paris Agreement. And since then, it has become kind of a pivot for policy and climate action. The net zero that basically, in a simplistic term, that we need to come at a level where the global greenhouse gas emission that we produce is not more than the emission that we capture or offset. So the popularity of net zero has grown momentously from, I think, from this COP. UK was leading on it. The net zero commitment now has 136 countries has committed to net zero. Around 500 cities and regions also part of the net zero commitments, and more recently, about 1,000 private sector organizations has committed that they will achieve net zero by 2050. In net zero debate, we know that developing countries need to emit for a while to grow, and for them it is expected that 2050 they can have a net zero target somewhere 2060. I think India has the longest 2070. Net zero targets are basically committed by countries, but also the private sector. I think these are the two important that I can debate. The rest we can infer. When a country as a public sector net zero commitment come forward, it means that there is radical change has to happen within the economic system and the political system of that country. The blockages that we see in terms of transition to net zero has been, when we talk about public sector, is more of a policy and political commitment, where we have the system that we're living for over 200 years based on fossil fuel economy. And now moving out of that will take time, and it has its inertia, it has its own vested interest to move toward net zero. For private sector, net zero is a very new concept, and so they are also committing in some of the private sector areas. For example, it's easier to commit net zero because we have a technology. Answering your question, can we move that? So for example, power sector, we have some technical answer that, moving to renewable wind, solar would enable net zero goal. And there are some sectors which is very difficult to do, for example, cement, steel, mining, aviation, and we don't have technology for that. So achieving net zero would depend, I think, in a simplistic term, in the public sector, how much political commitment is materialized into action. We have commitment, as Aisha was saying, in the big conferences, but it depends how much real politics turn into action. And that's why in the net zero research, it's coming out that, okay, net zero is a long-term target, 2050, it's pretty far away. So any net zero plan coming out of a country have to have few things. So that's why we believe it's a credible net zero commitment. A, are you front loading your climate action? Means what you plan to do by 2030, how much money you're investing, how much formalizing your net zero in your legislation. UK and few other countries was the few who have legislated net zero in climate action. And for example, one concrete example in how the legislation come into action. In UK, if any public sector contract, if it's more than £5 million, a company has to have a net zero plan in place. So that kind of restriction would enable private sector to go. So this is a public sector, you have legislation, you have a policy, and also regulatory measures to push toward net zero. The blockages has been because we have a history of fossil fuel economy, so the politics is difficult to, there's strong opposition within political circles to transition to net zero. And the private sector, we see that, greenwashing concept, which basically means that, private sector, because of few pressures, the young consumers, they're very pro-environment, very pro-protection, so they want globally products and companies to behave in a green way, what they call. So the new markets, the new consumer, which these companies are looking that we need to fulfill, otherwise we lose the market share. So they are kind of subscribing to net zero, and some of their net zero commitments fall under the greenwash category because we don't have accountability, clear mechanism. We don't have, and they also tend to focus on offsetting rather than reducing emission. So that's why the criticism is genuine that the private sector doing. So summing up for the private sector, now it's their business and commercial interest to be net zero for now, not the love for the planet. So these kind of push have brought these 1,000 companies. Some of them might have been genuinely targeting net zero. The other factor is that that the investor community is very much understood that if they invest in a coal plant, it's going to be a redundant asset. So they're not sending their money where they see that in the longer run there will be no return. So they're investing into new market which are renewable. They're investing into new raw material which can be used to change the entire supply chain. So we have this global momentum, and for now the commitments are coming in, and the next phase should be, and it has started, how we measure these zero commitments and how these companies disclose to the public and to the investor so they can be secure. So this is the start, but let's see. Thank you.
I think that was a very practical comment, and you have exposed some harsh truths about the private sector, that it is in their commercial interest to protect the planet. However, the picture is not so black. I think we are having global momentum. We are having more environmental activism in developing countries, even though they were not primary people or who actually contribute to the global climate change and who are actually damaging the earth overall. So with this, I'll move to the third panelist, Ms. Rina Saeed. You are managing national park that is right in the middle of an urban setting. So my question is, with we are having urbanization, the urban sprawl and population and all the activities, how do you, what challenges do you face when it comes to the conservation of ecological biodiversity, specifically in a national park where now we are also having leopards? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I was initially my career, I was a journalist and I used to report I still do, but less of it. And so, talking about policies, attending the COPs and criticizing government and leaders for lack of action. And then, it's easy to write about these issues. It's really difficult when you're in the role of a practitioner to actually, when it comes to action, it's extremely difficult, and it's been a real learning experience for me. It's learning curve has been very, very steep since I joined. I joined about a year, 3-4 months ago, and there are lots of challenges. We're so blessed and so lucky to have this beautiful national park, and it's full of biodiversity. We have so many different species, which even I did not know about. And I think I've used my role, because of my training as a journalist, I'm able to write about these different issues. So I try to do more public outreach, and that's why I think I was given this post as well, because of my public outreach. And I've tried to create awareness in the last year with lots of media engagement. The media has been very kind, but when it comes to the challenges, they're really immense, because we have encroachments, unabated encroachments. We have threats to our national park in terms of, we've tried to control the wood cutting, the extraction of wood and other resources from the park, which used to be just normal practices. And in fact, that's why the board was created. The board is not very old. It was created, Islamabad Wildlife Management Board was created in 2015 by the Islamabad High Court, precisely for this reason, that it wasn't being managed well. It was being managed by a CDA, Capital Development Authority. So please note, Development Authority, not Environmental Protection Authority. So their mandate is to develop the city, and our mandate is to protect our park. So we obviously we have different mandates, and so that's why in 2015, जो हमारे अभी senior board member है ZB Mirza, a very famous court case, ZB Mirza versus CDA at Islamabad High, which is still continuing, by the way. The case is not shut. In fact, the latest chapter is जो है Munal and the Devi golf course, and so I'll come to that. So वो था, उसके तहत फिर हमारा board बनाया गया 2015 में, and फिर hiring takes time. So 2017, my staff was hired, and then the board started operating. And I remember before I joined the board a few years ago, I went, I think, a very beautiful Trail 6, and I was told, okay, don't go up too high, because there's a few criminal elements, and be careful. And I have to say now that thanks to the board's work, very, very dedicated staff, about 41 rangers, and recently we completed our trainings, our recruitment, and now we're doing our training. So we have 35 more dedicated government staff now. So first they were on contract, they didn't really have government proper jobs, and now we've hired proper government. So now we're building our institution, and we are right now probably the best staffed, the best, I guess, funded national park, which is still not that much funding, but still in the entire country, because there are beautiful national parks in Pakistan. Like if you go to Kashmir, Panchara National Park, and so many others. But wahan kitne log honge? Really, literally on the ground, 3 or 4 wildlife rangers for huge areas, and this is just 17,000 hectares. It's not a large park, Margala Hills National Park. Also there's Shakarpariya and Raval Lake, but Shakarpariya is just, it's kind of a lost cause. Institutional encroachments itne ho gaye hain ki we also are thinking presenting to the government that we should just denotify that area, because really it's beyond now. I mean, very little wildlife left and full of invasive species as well. And we should keep, focus on Raval Lake. And of course, Banigala has also happened, unfortunately, and it can't be reversed probably now. But so we want to at least have migratory birds aate hain, so we want to at least save the lake areas, patrolling, and maybe about 100 meters so distance the banks of the river where you still, river getting the lake where you still find wildlife. So that's our focus with, on the hills and Raval Lake. So future may. So now that we have proper staff, we will increase our patrolling. Abhi jo kone hai park hai, they are still not very well managed, which is Shalat and Tasai, lots of encroachments there. And then there is the other boundary, which is Quaid-e-Azam University ke piche bahut khoobsurat ek valley hai, Rumbi Valley. Wahan bhi itni hamari patrolling, wahan bhi abhi tak sad to say ki shikar hame pata chalta hai, udhar cartridges milte hain. So we want to now spread out our staff now that we have more staff for patrolling. But yes, in the last 7 years, since 2017, 18, 19, 20, 5 years, बहुत ज़्यादा हमने control किया है, hunting पर, poaching पर, wood cutting पर, safety पर. We have trails, trail number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is closed right now. That's the leopard preserve area that we had declared by our former Prime Minister, and that's because we started monitoring the leopards because we saw their scars and markings, and it's all over the park. It's not just that leopards are only found in that area, but we found through our camera trap study कि उनकी density सबसे ज़्यादा थी. So when today's theme is for Earth Day is investing in Earth, so we invested in Trail 6 in the sense that we patrolled it heavily, we shut it for the public because वहाँ बहुत ज़्यादा human disturbance थी. Unfortunately, it's located right behind Faisal Masjid. So the kind of visitors we would get every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yes, we welcome, we want public to come and enjoy the park during the day. At night, it's for the wildlife is nocturnal, so we would appreciate if visitors don't go into the park. It's not even safe for them to go into the park at night. But what happened was that the Faisal Mosque, the visitors, they would leave their shoes inside the mosque, and they thought कि ये झूलों वाला park है, because for them, so we need a lot more. We need to make even more awareness and more aista. And I'm very pleased to know that the younger generation hai wo बहुत ज़्यादा, they really care about the planet and they are more involved in wildlife and they appreciate जो हमारे young trekkers हैं and even visitors हैं. But littering is another issue. Huge issue that we have, but then we also have a counter to that. We have these young dedicated volunteers who har Sunday जाते हैं, they're not being paid, and they go and they take literally bags and they pick up all the litter. वो कर campaign उसको highlight करके, I think बहुत ज़्यादा awareness हुई है. अब ये जो piece सुहागा road पे है, वो हमारा ज़्यादा problematic है. So anyway, going back to investing in Earth, there's a concept called rewilding. What is rewilding? And the UN talks about this, and even David Attenborough is the most famous naturalist in the world. He's almost, I think, 99 or almost. You can see his documentaries on Netflix, and beautiful documentaries. And rewilding just means restoring. It's another word for restoring. So हमने देखा Trail 6 पर, when we shut Trail 6 to the public, just to allow the leopards some breathing room because वो बहुत disturb हो रहे थे, उनके markings बहुत ज़्यादा. And we believe maybe COVID में जब trails बंद थी, तो maybe 1 or 2 leopards moved right close to the city, and they decided हमारे wild boars भी हैं और trail भी खाली है, तो why not? And once a leopard makes a territory, you can't request it, the leopard to please move away. So वहाँ पे जब हमने trail बंद किया, so nature is so amazing that it just restored itself without us doing anything except just stopping the human disturbance. Actually, the most dangerous species on the planet are human beings, unfortunately, So when we stopped visitors, it was very tough because people were used to going into the trail. हमारी कोई visitor fee नहीं है national park की. हमारा जो law है वो बहुत weak है. It's a 1979 wildlife ordinance. And we need to have a stronger act, and wo humne taiyar kiya, we drafted it. It's called the Nature and Islamabad. It's called the Islamabad Nature and Wildlife Management Act 2021. Well, now we're in 2022. It's unfortunately, it's in the system. It's gone to Establishment Division. Now it's a finance, and hopefully it will go to the Parliament eventually. We hope. And now the government has changed, so we are hoping because we're here for the animals, we're here for the national park. Politics doesn't really concern us, and so we hope even this new government will take up the act and have it passed, and it will strengthen our board. It will make us an authority. We will also be able to charge this very minimal, but we need to charge people something so that they have this, realization or this sort of, this feeling that we're now entering a national park, and it should mean something to them. It should not be a free for all, because आपने देखा है जो हमारी अभी currently battle चल रही है with La Montana, Manal, which is high up on the. It used to be a beautiful ridge. Maybe Aisha remembers. She's an avid trekker. She goes up to Vargala Hills National Park every weekend. So what एक खूबसूरत कुदरती तौर पे एक ridge थी, it has been totally destroyed and concretized, and that's the kind of development, that's the kind of trajectory we do not want to go on. And believe me, it's not a personal look. कहते हैं कि वो बन गई इसको चलने दें. अब हम चलने देंगे तो there are 20 more Manals. Which businessman does not want to earn good money? Who doesn't want to become a millionaire? Who doesn't want to? Everybody wants a lovely, ridge that they can overlook Islamabad. So it's the principle of the matter. These restaurants were built before the board was created. Unfortunately, we were not around. Otherwise, hum us waqt shor machate, rokte, kuch karte. And I believe citizens of Islamabad did try at that time, but they were not able to stop it. So अगर एक इतनी अच्छी Islamabad High Court से finally judgment आई है कि this should not be there, these restaurants should be shut down, and they should be nature should be restored, especially even people have been eating chunks of the national park because we were as a board not strong enough to fight. And before that, wo jo hamara golf course Navy ka banaya unhone, that was also a national park land, not all of it, but a big chunk of it. There used to be a proper cycling trail वहाँ पर एक ज़माने पर trail 6 से जब आप left होते थे, वो भी उन्होंने आगे करके उस ज़माने में maybe there was security reasons, so वो भी हम कह रहे हैं कि at least return our land. And then फिर आगे GHQ is being built in sector E10 now, so हम अभी से we want to be very clear where the boundary is, and that is what the court has ordered. A clear boundary should be demarcated because उस पे भी disputes होती हैं. And then there are also 32 villages living inside the national park, built up property there were some of them were paid by CDA and then yet they never moved, and yet it's quite a mess. वो भी court ने हमें direction दी थी कि उसको भी आप tackle करिए, and once and for all sort out your boundaries and then save what is left, and then hopefully move towards rewilding or restoring nature, because 50% of this national park is degraded. So also remember कि एक ज़माने में Aisha would remember कि वहाँ पर stone quarrying होती थी. Proper, अगर आप आगे जाएं Allahabad के side पर, तो you could see कि there's barely, the mountains are quite bare, and that's because वहाँ पर extraction होती थी. वो बहुत मुश्किल से citizens of Islamabad went to court, fought the mafias, and they pushed them out. So we do have a track record of success. And then there was this strange scheme to build a tunnel through Margala Hills National Park, goes Supreme Court tak gayi, and then finally we won. We meaning the citizens of Islamabad won the case. So people who live in the city, who love the national park, who appreciate nature, who visit the park regularly, like Aisha, they will fight for the park, and that's the good news. You have the forces who are, the mafias, the greed, the businesses, जो कहते हैं कि नहीं, park should be used. हमारे लिए park है. We should use it in the sense of not in the right. हम कहते हैं park को use करो, but for trekking, for enjoying nature, for appreciating nature, for allowing wildlife to flourish, and to leave it behind for your children and your grandchildren, so that when they grow up in Islamabad, inshallah, they'll also be able to enjoy this park. Because दूसरी side पे we have the mafias who say कि नहीं, हमारे road भी बन गई है, hotels भी बनने चाहिए, but business भी बननी चाहिए. We should be able to extract what we can from the park, and so ये दो thinking here. So it's almost like when you go to these conferences and you talk about the political will, and then you talk about actions needed on the ground, or it's like a little microcosm of what's happening at a global level. When you go and actually work on the ground, you realize the kind of forces that are fighting against you, and they're extremely powerful, extremely well connected, extremely wealthy, and extremely, I'm sorry to say, it's greed. At the end of the day, it's greed. When you have restaurants all over the city, why do you insist on keeping that restaurant? If you've made your money, leave something for future generations. We'll be thinking, it's that, why shouldn't, it's that sense of fighting back and not appreciating our work and not understanding, that where climate change is happening and the emissions, when the cars go up, I don't know, आप लोग जाते हैं ऊपर और enjoy करने अपनी सहरी इफ्तारी और जब आप ऊपर जाते हैं तो imagine the traffic jams, imagine the emissions, and the impact on the wildlife. And so it's not, we already have Murray is completely degraded, there's hardly any wildlife there. आपने अगर इस तरह का enjoy करना है तो आप उधर जाए, at least protected areas को तो respect करें. And the previous government, I have to say, announced, had their heart in the right place, the direction was good. They announced so many, I think almost 15, maybe more, 20, 15 national parks. It was supposed to become model national parks, but implementing it on the ground is very, very difficult. So, you might have the best of intentions, but itne entrenched mafias hain is mulk mein ke bahut mushkil se kaam hota hai. So, anyway, I think I'll stop now. I can go on and on.
Thank you, Ms. Rina, and I must appreciate that we have a women leader who is, managing the national park, and despite of so many challenges, you're still very much optimistic about the conservation efforts that maybe we'll have someday. We'll actually have the national park in its true sense, without any emissions, without any urban development. So before I move to our next panelist, Ms. Aisha, I think you have to leave.
I'll listen to
Okay. So Mr. Rehan Khilji from Poverty Alleviation Fund, Pakistan, we would like to know what are your thoughts on the theme of this year's Earth Day, which is Invest in Our Planet.
Thank you very much. For representing my themes, I have prepared a presentation which will reflect today's theme, and this will give you an idea about the overall general scenario of with reference to today's theme, and especially it focus on the work of the organization which are working for protecting the environment. So let's start. Next slide, please. It's the first basic introductory slide. As you know, the World Earth Day is also known as International Mother Earth Day, we celebrate on April 22nd every year. And it was first, its idea was first given by peace activist John McConnell in 1969 during a UNESCO conference at San Francisco. After that, it is celebrated every year. And the theme for the World Earth Day today, this year, is Invest in Our Planet, with a focus on the 6 major parts, which are great global cleanup, sustainable fashion, thoughts, especially litter, हमारे जो rivers हैं, जो हमारी streams हैं, इनको clean up करें. Second is the sustainable fashion. As you know, industry is modernizing day by day. So this industry is also, it contributes about 8% of the greenhouse emission gases. So now it's time to think about this topic, especially जो हमारी leather की industry है, इसके अंदर जो chemicals और वो use हो रहे हैं, especially जो उनकी chimneys होती हैं या उनका जो outlet होता है, वो इन्होंने इस तरह छोड़ा था जो वहाँ पे काफी उसके लिए negative impact environment के लिए protect. Especially अगर आप लोग गए हो वजीराबाद से towards फैसलाबाद, तो उस रोड के ऊपर जो factories लगी हुई हैं उधर खासली या फैसलाबाद वाली side पे, तो वहाँ पे काफी problem है. Next जो है canopy project, it's focus towards the tree plantation. जैसे last government थी उनका 10 million tsunami project था, इसके लिए उस पे focus था. इसमें ये कि जो हमारे फॉरेस्ट हैं दे कंट्रीब्यूट अबाउट 80% होमलैंड फॉर द बायोडाइवर्सिटी, तो हमें इसको प्रोटेक्ट करने की जरूरत है, तो इस थीम के ऊपर फोकस है। नेक्स्ट नाउ मेजर थ्रेट्स टू इन्वेस्ट इन आवर प्लैनेट्स, कि हम काम तो करना चाह रहे हैं, बट इसके लिए हमारे मेजर थ्रेट्स क्या आ रहे हैं। इसमें जो पहला थ्रेट आ रहा है वो क्लाइमेट चेंज का है। क्लाइमेट चेंज जो ओवरऑल है आपको पता है पूरे वर्ल्ड लेवल के ऊपर ये इशू, और स्पेसिफिक पाकिस्तान अनलकीली जो इसकी ज्योग्राफिकल कंडीशन है वो इसकी वजह से पाकिस्तान इसमें ज्यादा इफेक्ट हो रहा है। अब क्लाइमेट चेंज में अगर टेम्परेचर के हवाले से बात की जाए तो पाकिस्तान में ओवरऑल 4 सीजन होते थे, बट जो रिसर्चर्स हैं वो कह रहे हैं कि विद इन 20 to 25 ईयर्स हो सकता है कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर ओनली 2 जो सीजन है वो रह जाए। इसकी एग्जांपल आप इस ईयर भी देख सकते हैं कि मार्च और फेब और मार्च का नॉर्मली स्प्रिंग का सीजन होता था, बट अब आप देख लें कि इस साल मार्च में ही समर की हमें फीलिंग आनी शुरू हो गई है। तो ये जो रिसर्चर्स हैं वो कह रहे हैं कि शायद मे भी पाकिस्तान में 2 ही सीजन रह जाएंगे। नेक्स्ट इसी तरह जो क्लाइमेट चेंज का अभी बैक करेंगे, इसी तरह नेक्स्ट जो क्लाइमेट चेंज का इफेक्ट आया है वो ग्लेशियर मेल्ट हुए हैं, सी लेवल राइज हुआ है, स्पेशली जो हमारी कोस्टल बेल्ट है सिंध एरिया में, वहां पे जो ठट्टा बदीन और सजावल का एरिया है उसकी काफी ज्यादा जो लैंड है वो इरोड हो गई है। इसमें जो कोई 20 लाख एकड़ के करीब जो जमीन है ठट्टा की वो समंदर का पार्ट बन चुकी है, और अभी एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि विद इन 25 ईयर्स 651 जो मुरब्बा एकड़ जमीन है वो कोस्टल पार्ट बन जाएगी, और उससे फिर ये इशू क्रिएट होगा कि लोगों की जो सेटलमेंट का इशू, फिर उसके साइकोलॉजिकल इफेक्ट्स, फिर मतलब ये सारे प्रॉब्लम्स आ जाएंगे। तो इसके ऊपर हमें देखने की जरूरत है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज हमें इधर भी इफेक्ट कर रही है। सेम इसी तरह हैबिटेट लॉस वो डिग्रेडेशन वही है कि हमारी जो डिफॉरेस्टेशन चल रही है, अर्बनाइजेशन का बहुत ज्यादा ट्रेंड चल रहा है, तो ये उस चीज को इफेक्ट कर रही है। फिर पोल्यूशन जो ये भी एक मेजर थ्रेट है। पोल्यूशन जो है 3 टाइप्स की है, इसमें लैंड की पोल्यूशन है, मैरीन पोल्यूशन है और एयर का पोल्यूशन है, ठीक है। तो ये इस चीज को इफेक्ट कर रहा है। और जो दूसरे पोटेंशियल थ्रेट्स हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल लास्ट अभी कोरोना पेंडेमिक आया हुआ है, इसमें एनिमल्स के अंदर डिजीज आ जाती है। लास्ट अभी कराची में हमने सुना था कि एनिमल्स के अंदर वो स्किन की जो एलर्जी वाले इश्यूज, तो इस किस्म के जो पेंडेमिक्स आ जाते हैं ये भी हमारे लिए थ्रेट है टुवर्ड्स इन्वेस्ट इन आवर प्लेनेट, तो इनके ऊपर काम करने की जरूरत है। नेक्स्ट कर देंगे प्लीज। एयर पोल्यूशन के हवाले से कुछ मैंने थोड़े से फैक्ट्स डाले हैं कि थोड़ा सा हमें आइडिया हो कि एयर पोल्यूशन हमें किस तरह मतलब इफेक्ट कर रहा है। एक स्टडी के मुताबिक जो हमारी ओजोन लेयर है वो डिप्लीट वो मतलब उसको इफेक्ट हो रहा है, तो उसके मुताबिक ये है कि बाय 2030 26% जो हमारी स्टेपल क्रॉप्स हैं उनकी प्रोडक्शन में कमी हो जाएगी। एक और फैक्ट ये है कि 92% जो वर्ल्ड वाइड जो पीपल है वो सेफ जो एयर है उसमें वो सांस नहीं ले सकते, उनके लिए वो अवेलेबल। और जो एक और जो ग्लोबल जो डेथ्स हो रही हैं मुख्तलिफ रीजंस की वजह से होती हैं, तो उनमें से जो नंबर 4 पे जो लीडिंग रीजन है डेथ का वो आउटडोर एयर पोल्यूशन है, ठीक है। और इसकी वजह से वर्ल्ड लेवल पे 3.2 मिलियन डेथ्स एनुअली हो रही है। और अकॉर्डिंग टू यूनिसेफ जो ब्रेन डेवलपमेंट है कोई 17 मिलियन इन्फेंट्स में वो एट द रिस्क है, इसकी वजह से क्या होता है कि वो डिसेबल बच्चे मेंटली डिसऑर्डर्ड उनकी बर्थ हो रही है, वो भी एक एयर पोल्यूशन का एक रीजन है। और अब इस सब के रिस्पॉन्सिबल ह्यूमन है, ठीक है। और इसको क्योर करने के लिए प्रोटेक्ट इसकी वेलफेयर के लिए फिर अब हमें खर्च भी करना पड़ रहा है, और एनुअली एस्टिमेट है कि कोई $5 ट्रिलियन हम इसके ऊपर एनुअली इसके ऊपर अब खर्च कर रहे हैं। और अगर कार्बन एमिशंस की बात की जाए तो वर्ल्ड वाइड 2 कंट्रीज का मेजर कंट्रीब्यूशन है कार्बन एमिशंस में, इसमें चाइना और यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स है। मगर और पाकिस्तान का जो इसमें जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो लेस देन 1% है, मगर अनलकीली पाकिस्तान जो है वो वल्नरेबल कंट्रीज में रैंकिंग पे 5th नंबर पर आता है। और इसी वजह से ये है कि हमें जो क्लाइमेट चेंज और ये टेम्परेचर और ये सारे इश्यूज सेव करने पड़ते हैं। नेक्स्ट कर दें प्लीज। अच्छा, अभी नेक्स्ट ये मैं कर रहा हूँ अपनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का रोल कि जो हमारी जैसे भी आप लोग स्टूडेंट्स हैं प्रैक्टिकल लाइफ में आप लोग आएंगे, ताकि आप लोगों को भी आइडिया हो कि जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है व्हाट दे आर वर्किंग फॉर प्रोटेक्टिंग एनवायरनमेंट। तो हमारी जो PPAF है पाकिस्तान पॉवर्टी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज वन ऑफ द पायनियर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एंड वर्किंग अक्रॉस 147 डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स इन द पाकिस्तान एंड इन कोलैबोरेशन विद डिफरेंट डोनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस। और हमारा मेन जो मोटिव ऑब्जेक्टिव है टू एरेडिकेट पॉवर्टी फ्रॉम द कंट्री, ठीक है। और इसमें हम फिर प्रोजेक्ट्स कर रहे होते हैं मुख्तलिफ, उसमें सोशल और इकोनॉमिकल सोशल और एनवायरमेंटल साइड को हम देख रहे होते हैं। और इसमें हमारा एनवायरनमेंट का एक यूनिट है, एनवायरनमेंट एंड सोशल मैनेजमेंट यूनिट, मैं उसका पार्ट हूँ। और हमारा फोकस ये होता है कि हमारी जितनी भी इंटरवेंशंस पूरे पाकिस्तान में चल रही हैं उनसे कोई एनवायरनमेंट के ऊपर नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट ना आए, और इनकेस अगर कहीं पर नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट आ रहा है तो उसको मिनिमाइज करने के लिए हम क्या मिटिगेशन मेजर्स ले सकते हैं। और PPAF इज आल्सो एन ISO सर्टिफाइड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, तो हम विद इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन किस तरह हम अपनी एनवायरनमेंट को प्रोटेक्ट कर रहे हैं उसके हवाले से हम ISO के प्लेटफॉर्म से कुछ काम कर रहे हैं। उसमें वैसे जनरली मैं आपको बता देता हूँ, उसमें हमने फोटोकॉपियर को सेंट्रलाइज किया हुआ है, डबल साइडेड उसकी प्रिंटिंग है। स्पेशली हमने वेस्ट को, जो प्लास्टिक वेस्ट बहुत जनरेट होता था ऑफिस में, वो वाटर बॉटल्स का था। डेली बेसिस पे फॉर एग्जांपल अगर 150 प्लस हमारे एम्प्लॉयज है तो सबको डेली बेसिस पे वाटर बॉटल दी जाती थी। उसे मंथ पे आप कन्वर्ट करें तो प्लास्टिक का वेस्ट बहुत ज्यादा हो जाता है। उसको मिनिमाइज करने के लिए हमने रीयूजेबल बॉटल्स जो है हर अपने स्टाफ को दे दी और डिस्पेंसर प्लेस कर दिया फ्लोर पे, वहां से उसको डेली बेसिस पे वो करते हैं। फिर इसी तरह डबल साइडेड प्रिंटिंग की है, उससे हमने पेपर वेस्टेज को कोई 10% के करीब रिड्यूस किया है। तो ये हमारे कुछ काम है जो फ्रॉम ISO के प्लेटफॉर्म से हम कर रहे होते हैं। नेक्स्ट कर देंगे प्लीज। ये बाकी कुछ स्लाइड्स हैं हमारे जो हम फील्ड लेवल पे काम कर रहे हैं फॉर प्रोटेक्टिंग एनवायरनमेंट एंड टू इन्वेस्ट इन आवर प्लेनेट। इसमें हमें PPAF को नवंबर 2018 में एनर्जी इंस्टीट्यूट ये अवार्ड मिला था फॉर सोलर एनर्जी मिनी ग्रिड स्टेशंस। ये हमारे थे सवाबी में, लकी, बरबत में एंड करक में। और एनर्जी रिन्यूएबल के हवाले से हमारे को 1300 प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं ये 60 डिस्ट्रिक्ट के अंदर, जिससे हमारे कोई 5 लाख के करीब जो पीपल है वो बेनिफिट हो रहे हैं। स्लाइड करते हैं। हमारा एक और प्रोजेक्ट था PPR के हवाले से, प्रोग्राम फॉर पॉवर्टी ग्रेजुएशन। ये इटालियन डोनर हमारा था। इसमें हमने जो था कम्युनिटी फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे काम किया था, हेल्थ के ऊपर, एजुकेशन के ऊपर, लाइवलीहुड्स के ऊपर। इसमें हमारी मेडिकल फैसिलिटीज भी थी। टोटल हमारी कोई 118 मेडिकल फैसिलिटीज थी, जिसके अंदर से 87 को हमने इंसिनरेटर्स प्रोवाइड किए थे फॉर बर्निंग मेडिकल वेस्ट, और जो 31 थी वो पे डिस्पोजल को यूज करें। ये एग्जांपल है हमारी पार्टनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन SRSP लोअर दीव में काम कर रही है, तो उनके लिए ये इंसिनरेटर बनाया था जिसके अंदर ये अपना मेडिकल वेस्ट को बर्न करते हैं। नेक्स्ट जो है इसके ऊपर ये हमने सोलर पैनल दिए थे रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के ऊपर। इसके अंदर ये नॉर्मली पहले जो ट्रेंड था वो डीजल इंजन यूज करते थे ट्यूबवेल चलाने के लिए, जिससे यह था कि एयर पोल्यूशन काफी ज्यादा होता था। अब हमने इसको कन्वर्ट करके सोलर के ऊपर कर दिया है, तो जिसकी वजह से उस को भी कन्वर्ट पोल्यूशन को मिनिमाइज करने में काफी। ये हमारी पार्टनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है शहर और डिस्ट्रिक्ट पश्चिम में काम कर रही है बलूचिस्तान। नेक्स्ट कर देंगे। हमारी ऑन एंड ऑफ ट्री प्लांटेशन की कैंपेन चल रही थी। हमने कोई 200 के करीब लास्ट ये कचनार पार्क की इस्लामाबाद में प्लांटेशन की थी, उधर की है। एक जो हमने और इनिशिएटिव लिया वो हमने टूरिस्ट असिस्टेंट प्रोग्राम किया। ये हमने नीलम वैली AJK में किया था। वहां पे अगर आप जाएं तो वहां पे एज सच टूरिस्ट के लिए कोई होटलिंग या उसके लिए कोई सिस्टम नहीं है। तो उसके लिए हमने ये इनिशिएटिव किया एनवायरनमेंट के उसमें कि वहाँ की जो हमारी कम्युनिटीज थी जो हमारे साथ रजिस्टर है, उनसे हमने बात की और उनका एक घर हमने रेनोवेट करके दिया। उसके ऊपर हमने फाइनेंसिंग की, उनको 50,000 की और उसको रेनोवेट करके दिया। और उसमें यह कि वो टूरिस्ट वगैरह जाते हैं तो वहाँ पे वो अपना वो स्टे कर सकते हैं। फिर हमारा फोकस होता है कि वो बायोडाइवर्सिटी को किसी भी हवाले से डैमेज नहीं करेंगे। फिर वेस्ट को वो किस तरह करेंगे उसके लिए हमने उनको गाइडलाइंस दी है। और उसके अलावा जिसके घर को हमने रेनोवेट करके दिया है उसके लिए फिर वो अर्निंग का भी बायस बना है कि उसके बाद जो गेस्ट आगे ठहरते हैं तो वो पर नाइट का उनसे फिर चार्ज कर लेते हैं। तो इसको हम टूरिस्ट असिस्टेंट प्रोग्राम में शामिल करते हैं। एक हमारा है क्लाइमेट प्रोटेक्शन क्लस्टर बलूचिस्तान। ये हमने बलूचिस्तान गवर्नमेंट के साथ MOU साइन किया, ये भी हम इसके ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं। इसमें स्पेशली जियारत वाली साइड पे, जैसे वहाँ पे लोग आते हैं ईद के ऊपर, वहाँ पे खासा इस तरह लेटर और वो होता है, तो उसके लिए हमने वहाँ पे बेंस वगैरह और इस तरह लोगों को थोड़ा सा सेंसिटाइज करके और ये किया। एक और ये पिक्चर है पार्टनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन SRSP डिस्ट्रिक्ट अपर दीव में। वहाँ पे हमने ये माइक्रो हाइडल दिया था, तो इधर हमने ये आर्टिफिशियल जो थी वाटरफॉल एक बना के दिया, तो रिक्रिएशन का एक मतलब जो उधर विजिटर्स आ रहे हैं उनके लिए स्पॉट एक बन गया। नेक्स्ट कर देंगे। वो जो स्टार्ट में एक पिक्चर है ये इसके हमने वाटर स्टोरेज पॉन्ड दिया। ये हमारा लासिक प्रोजेक्ट है, पार्टनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है खौंदेकोर अपर दीर के अंदर। उसके बाद वाटर वेस्टेज को बचाने के लिए हमने किचन गार्डनिंग का कॉन्सेप्ट अपनी कम्युनिटीज में देते हैं कि जो पानी वेस्ट हो रहा है आप उससे किचन गार्डनिंग कर सकते हैं। तो ये जो हमारा इधर का बेनिफिशियरी था, इसमें कोई 60,000 रुपीज थी, जहाँ से फिर वो सेपिंग्स सेल की थी, मतलब उससे ट्री कटिंग के ऊपर हम बहुत ज्यादा वो मतलब लोगों को सेंसिटाइज कर रहे होते कि आपने नहीं कर रहे हैं। और इन केस हमारी किसी स्कीम के दौरान दरख्तों की कटाई इन केस करनी पड़ जाती है, वो तो हम अलाउ नहीं करते हैं। अगर इन केस करनी पड़ जाती है तो हम उनको कहते हैं आपने 5 या 7 दरख्त इसकी रिप्लेसमेंट में लगाने। ये वाली एक पिक्चर किला सैफुल्ला की है, पार्टनर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन तरक्की फाउंडेशन। ये हमारी इरिगेशन चैनल था, डिजाइन इसका स्ट्रेट था, बस इसके रास्ते में ये दरख्त आ रहे थे, काटने पड़ रहे थे। और बलूचिस्तान की कंडीशन आपको पता है कि वहाँ पे वैसे ही फॉरेस्ट बहुत ज्यादा कम है, तो इनको सेव करने के लिए हमने इसका डिजाइन ही जिगजैग कर दिया था। तो ये उसके हवाले से फिर हमारा इंडिजिनस पीपल प्लानिंग फ्रेमवर्क है। ये जो हमारी कैलाश कम्युनिटी है चित्राल में, उनको सपोर्ट करने के लिए हम ये काम कर रहे हैं। उनके हवाले से हम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का, लाइवलीहुड का और बाकी जो काम कर रहे हैं कि वो किस तरह एनवायरनमेंट को इसमें प्रोटेक्ट कर सकते हैं, इसके वो गाइडलाइंस है। नेक्स्ट आ जाता है कि योर रोल इन इन्वेस्ट इन आवर प्लान, कि अब हमारा इसमें क्या रोल हो सकता है। नेक्स्ट कर देंगे। इसमें एक तो हमारा रोल यही हो सकता है कि जो कोई भी हमारे पास अवेलेबल रिसोर्सेज है हम उनको किस तरह अच्छे तरीके से यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं। फिर हम रिसाइकल रीयूज के कॉन्सेप्ट को प्रमोट करें। इसकी एग्जांपल मैं अपने एक बेनिफिशियरी की भी दूंगा, उसको हमने प्रमोट किया लाइवलीहुड कंपोनेंट में। वो माजूर था और उसने ये बैंगल्स का, चूड़ियों का अपनी वो शॉप एक डाली थी। अब उसके पास फिर इतने पैसे नहीं थे कि वो अपनी रैक या कवर्ड वगैरह बना सकता, तो उसको फिर हमने यही कहा कि तुम मार्केट से बैंगल्स वगैरह लेकर आते हो, इसके जो डब्बे हैं इन्हीं को फेंको मत, मतलब ये वेस्ट भी रिड्यूस होगा और इन्हीं को जमा करके अपनी बैग पर अलमारी स्कीम बना लो। तो उसने फिर यही किया था कि वो जो बैंगल्स के डब्बे, चूड़ियों के डब्बे आते हैं, उन्हें जमा करके उसी को फिर उसने वो अलमारी के तौर पे वो बना लिया था। तो इसको हम कहते हैं कि कोशिश करें कि हम अपनी मतलब डोमेस्टिक लाइफ में भी इस चीज को प्रमोट करें कि जहां मुमकिन हो सके हम इसको रिसाइकिल। फिर यही अवेयरनेस कैंपेन्स हैं जो मतलब हम लोगों को प्रोवाइड करें। ट्री प्लांटेशन, पूल इट, इसके ऊपर विद इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन पे हम लोग कर रहे होते हैं कि जो हमारा स्टाफ कहीं जो 2-3 स्टाफ एक ही एरिया से आ रहे होते हैं, कोशिश करते हैं कि वो पूल करके एक ही गाड़ी में वो उस जगह आ जाए। इससे भी हम कार्बन एमिशन और एयर पोल्यूशन को कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं। स्मार्ट हाउस कंस्ट्रक्शन के ऊपर हम जा सकते हैं। आजकल मतलब ग्रीन कंस्ट्रक्शन का भी ट्रेंड काफी है, तो उसको हम एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हैं कि क्या क्या वो ट्रेंड्स आ रहे हैं इसके हवाले से। और स्टॉप बर्निंग गार्बेज, मतलब इसके अलावा और भी बहुत ज्यादा चीजें हैं जो हम कर सकते हैं। ये जेनेरिक से मैंने डाले। बर्निंग गार्बेज नॉर्मली हमने देखा है हमारी स्ट्रीट्स में नॉर्मली कूड़ा लोग जला देते हैं, वो इस चीज के, या स्पेशली रूरल एरियाज में जाए तो जब वो एक क्रॉप से दूसरी फसल की तरफ कन्वर्ट करते हैं तो पूरा जो उनका होती है फील्ड, उसको वो आग लगा देते हैं। तो इसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा सेंसिटाइज करने की जरूरत है कि इन चीजों के ऊपर थोड़ा सा फोकस करें। और अगर गवर्नमेंट लेवल के ऊपर हम बात करें तो उसके लिए थोड़ा सा ये है कि हर साल जैसे हमारा फ्लडिंग आ जाती है, तो उसके लिए कोशिश गवर्नमेंट ये कर सकती है कि हम स्टोरेज जो लेक्स है वो कोई बना सकते हैं, ताकि वो जो हमारा पानी हर साल क्यूबिक वेस्ट हो जाता है, सी में चला जाता है, वो कहीं पर स्टोर हो जाए। इसके अलावा हम एजुकेशन डिपार्टमेंट से कह सकते हैं कि वो एनवायरनमेंट के टॉपिक को अपने करिकुलम में ऐड करें, ताकि जो हमारे स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो एनवायरनमेंट के ऊपर थोड़ा सा सेंसिटाइज हो जाए। फिर इसके अलावा जो हमारी मॉडर्नाइजेशन इंडस्ट्री में हो रही है, जो खासतौर पे इन्वॉल्व है कार्बन एमिशंस में, तो उसके ऊपर गवर्नमेंट जो और टैक्सेस लगा रही है वो कार्बन टैक्स के नाम से भी उनके ऊपर टैक्स लगा सकती है, और उससे जो रेवेन्यू जनरेट हो वो आगे इसको ग्रीन एनवायरनमेंट के ऊपर वो खर्च कर सकती है। तो ये मेरी थोड़ी सी रिमार्क्स थे with respect to today's theme. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and that was really amazing what PPAF is doing on ground. And I'm really glad that you have mentioned those projects which are happening and actually which are being practical on ground, and you have also highlighted what you can do. So coming back to you, Mr. Nadeem, as we have mentioned that commercialization, because of commercialization, private sector is engaged. But I think PPAF is doing a really great job in terms of investing in our planet. My question is, the IPCC released the Working Group 3 report was released recently, and they have mentioned they have asked the world to degrowth, and they have asked the countries to adopt measures and move towards degrowth. Now, if we talk about development world, I think that is not very difficult for them, but still that is not very practical also. But for developing country, that is not the solution. So in this context, what are your thoughts? They are asking the world for degrowth, so to lessen the emissions. So do you think that's a practical thing if that is adopted by the world?
I mean, these economic versus green growth debate started with a very famous report from Lord Stern, 2006, I believe. And there's a new version came in 2018 about, it's called Economics of Climate Change. The basic argument is that the growth engine that we use up to this point is heavily fossil fuel based, and going ahead, the economies and the businesses need to transform the way they produce goods and services. So degrowth concept came when is a concept fundamentally assumed that we will continue the fossil fuel power. But now the economics has come to a point with the evidence that switching from fossil fuel based power to renewable power and transport and mobility that run on combustion engine, our cars, etc., on electric car, and some a few other sectors. It's possible to grow in a term where we achieve growth and don't jeopardize the planet. There is, UK has committed to, UK needs to invest 1% of its GDP in every year up to 2030. So they cannot, for all economic reason, and they will gain about 4.5% of the GDP. So if we continue, let's say we don't switch to renewable energy, we don't change our mobility, transportation to electric vehicles, and likewise reduce emission in cement, aviation, all these hard to mitigate sectors, the global economy will shrink by 7 to 10%, which means that we are heading toward a path where there will be job losses, there will be economic catastrophe. So whatever we have now is that it's an all economic benefit to move toward green growth and rather than degrowth. And we have model and technology in some of the sectors as I mentioned earlier, and some of the technology we need, and that's where government need to invest. And that's why in COP22 we had a Glasgow breakthrough on technologies in 4 sectors which are hard to. We don't have technology advanced enough to scale. So that's where I think the degrowth might not be a good option. We continue growing, but growing responsibly.
Thank you. Now, Aisha, I would like to ask you, now living in Pakistan, and we do have environmental activism in our country, as the other panelists have mentioned. But there's a problem. We have indigenous communities, and I think you would second Margilla Hills National Park is also, there are so many indigenous communities living around the national park as well. So when we have to explain to them about the conservation and about the climate change and global warming, we have so many different terminologies in English language, but we don't have different terminologies in our local languages. So how do you see that as a challenge? And do you think this issue with the language, it creates skepticism about the climate change and the denialism that we still have in our country?
I've been a practitioner for over 2 decades, and I have been working in the remotest mountain regions in this country, the Central Karakoram National Park. And, the challenges that Rina faces here in the Margalla Hills appear nothing compared to that 10,000 square kilometer park, which is full of the largest and the densest glaciers we have. That region is part of the HKH. It's also called the third pole. So I, really don't think that language in that way is such a barrier, because I feel that even when we are communicating this message in English, it's not resonating with the people somehow, because it's a slow onset effect that takes place as a result of climate change. And when I went to work there, I thought that, I don't need to either carry a gender tag on my, cufflinks or arms and, go front-loaded with an agenda, which will receive a backlash, nor do I need to go in with an agenda of conservation. I need to go with an agenda of economy that will support the local community. So I think you can get the results that you want, but it depends on how you're packaging that message. Because when I said, protect the environment, first my rude shock was, and a wake-up call, in fact, that I went there, I saw people burning wood, and I saw people filthy and dirty, and I saw, people kind of living in unhygienic conditions. And I went on this, campaign rally telling everybody, how can you live like this? This is like living like animals. How can you degrade the environment? Why are you burning firewood? Why are you doing this? I lived with that community where there was no sanitation, no electricity, no facilities. There was just a tent in my, little drum, and I lived 3 months with them. And I realized after 20 days, I was doing exactly the same things that they were doing. I was doing all the same things. I was cutting the trees, it couldn't matter to me. I was keeping myself warm. I was not bathing. I had red locks. I was going to the riverside. I was, getting a little pail of water. I was just washing my hands barely, to keep myself clean. So I realized this is not how it works. You have to give those basic needs, meet those basic needs of the community. So I switched from, just pure environmental to linking ecology with economy. So if I wanted that particular area, which at that point was my focus, I said, how can I do something that will generate revenue for this community? So when we set up the national park, that trek that takes you, for 7 days of walking to the base camp of K2, we established designated camping sites. And then we trained the community on how to maintain, how to segregate waste, how to dispose waste, how to, have good, clean drinking water facilities. So we put a proper camping structure in place first over there, then trained the community to say, now you charge a camping fee. So they started earning money. So the moment they started earning money, it brought more tourism to that area. So they realized the cleaner they keep that environment, the more revenue they make. So within months, they were making 2-3 lakhs from each campsite. And then they were using that money to pay salaries for people. So they were creating employment for their own community. And they were also investing the surplus in other things which they need. They determine their own needs and priorities better than we know what to do. So, I feel that we need to take this message in a different way, which makes the communities feel that if you do this, it will give this back to you. And if you degrade this, these are the losses. So at the end of the day, everything actually is connected to the economy. And for the poor people, it makes more sense than it does for us who can keep up with inflation and, afford to degrade the environment, but they cannot. They rely directly on the ecological goods and services. So you need to make that connection with the people over there. So I strongly advocate to Rina that, we should have it, without even the authority, we should have an entry fee for this park. We should start generating, revenue, and that can be reinvested in the park by getting the local people to become custodians and pay them that money back to keep that park clean. But we have to link that ecology with economy to make it successful. That's what I've learned from my own experiences, that formula always works. So if you package that in any language that the people understand, it makes it easier. I'm not going to go and speak to, rural communities in English. I mean, you will speak to them in Urdu, or if you're going, I work in Baltistan, so I always have Balti people and they translate what I say in Balti. So that connection is a secondary connection. The first is, how are you addressing the problem for them? So.
I think that's a very valid suggestion that we need to monetize our natural reserves, our national parks, because otherwise it's not easy to convince people to about the conservation and protection efforts. And thank you so much for your remarks. Now I would like to request our audience if they have any questions. The floor is open for questions. For the panelists, if you have any questions, you can ask. No questions?
Assalamualaikum. I am Khilji from International Environmental Science. My question is that, as we say, it's our work about, so when we are doing work on conservation of biodiversity, and these roads cause segregation to habitats. So when you are going to restore the environment and biodiversity, then how you should cope with that problem? Because roads are built and they cannot be destroyed. So what should you do?
Thank you very much. In fact, that was a big issue. The road, well, they were expanding the road, and they quote हमारे जो 1979 wildlife ordinance में section 21 के तहत भी road access roads and hotels are allowed in the national park, so only if they meet the objectives of the national park. So they do provide some service for the access roads for maybe visitors. तो ये जो road बन गई थी ये आहिस्ता आहिस्ता expand होती गई और लोगों ने I think शायद protest भी किया था उस जमाने में, वहाँ बत्तियां भी लग गई because they said cited security reasons. पर बहुत negotiations उस वक्त भी community citizens ने किया था, not with the community, sorry, with the district administration कि आप at least बत्तियां रात को तो बंद कर दें so that wildlife does not get disturbed. But you're very right, their habitat has been fragmented. बहुत ज़्यादा leopard sightings नजर आती हैं उस road पर. It's very unfortunate. And what we want to do in the future is when we start charging a visitor fee to enter the park, and that will be बिल्कुल भी सोहावा road का बिल्कुल जब शुरू होता है zoo के पास वहाँ से national park की boundary शुरू हो जाती है. So we would like a proper जैसे you have if you visited Kunjarat National Park, which I can think of as a proper when you come on the KKH बकायदा उधर एक barricade लगा होता है and you have to pay. You have to, if you're a foreigner, you show your passport and you pay your it's I think more expensive for foreigners, less for local Pakistanis, and so wo you pay an entrance fee. I don't remember how much it was. Is it 100 rupees or was it? I haven't been in a while. But
I don't know. For the central Karakoram, there was nothing, and we got $100.
$100 for foreigners. So शायद इतना ज़्यादा हम ना charge करें, but कुछ तो एक nominal fee, you have to actually pay a fee and then you enter into the park, which is not happening right now. If they were free for all, और लोग जाते हैं और they don't appreciate the fact that they're inside a protected national park. वहाँ पर जो traffic जाती है, जो jams होती हैं because of La Montana and Manal, then वहाँ यही होता है कि littering, बहुत ज़्यादा littering होती है. Trails पर तो हमने control कर लिया. We have proper checking when you enter a trail. वहाँ हमारे IWMP के rangers बैठे होते हैं, वो आपसे पूछते हैं कि आपके knapsack में क्या है, whatever. So वहाँ पर अब बहुत कम हो गई है. जो हमारे volunteers कह रहे थे कि now when they go, पहले जहाँ 5-6 bags आते थे litter के, आपको एक bag आ रहा है. So literally littering, but road पर we have no. ना हम वो control कर सकते हैं traffic को, ना हम charge कर सकते हैं. Like I said, our law is very weak, so we have to wait for our act to be passed before. I mean, I don't know how we can get around it. We've tried, but anybody can take us to court, and then if we try to place a barricade, तो वो हम section 144 लगा लेते हैं जब fire season है, especially now April, May, June. तो fire season तो वहाँ पर बहुत खतरा है कि एकदम आग लग जाए तो बहुत जल्दी spread हो जाती है because all the grass is very very dry. There's hardly any rains during the season. तो उस वक्त फिर हम district administration के help से, but उसको भी implement करना is very difficult because barbecue करने लोग car करते हैं, वहाँ ही barbecue करके वहाँ ही अपना सारा कुछ खाने पीने की चीजें और अपना सारे प्लास्टिक के उधर ही फेंक कर they leave. So we really, I mean, we've tried running so many campaigns, but honestly, until we have a proper visitor fee and we are able to find people, हमारे अपने जो staff है who are patrolling, अगर कोई like if you're littering, अगर उसी वक्त आपको पकड़ के आपको fine करे तो वो फिर then the system can work, but we do not have the power to fine anyone. हमें उनको पकड़ के we have to call the magistrate. The magistrate आते तो आपको पता है कौन रुकता है किसके लिए. So ये but you are very right कि ये fragmentation, and that's why we are against Margala Avenue. एक बहुत मशहूर आपने सुना होगा एक project है CDA का Margala Avenue का बनाने का, और वो भी हमारे जो environmentalists थे, they went to court against it. And because they're very concerned कि ठीक है D12 तक तो सड़क बन जाएगी, but D12 के बाद where is this avenue going to go? We do not want it because हमारे पार्क का एक buffer zone भी होना चाहिए, जो unfortunately अभी तक हमने इसको demarcate नहीं किया because our management plan is being made right now. अभी तक Margala Hills National Park का proper management plan ही नहीं बना इतने सदियों से, तो अब वो बन रहा है, वो May में तैयार होगा. We will share it with the public and we will share it with stakeholders, and उसमें we will have 4 zones, buffer zones, recreational zones, सारी हम zoning करेंगे. Proper surveys हो रही हैं, wildlife की भी अभी हो रही है. So hopefully we're moving towards proper scientific management. So ये भी road का भी हमें बहुत, we are very worried that we cannot afford any more roads inside the national park, and even this road if you cross over तो ये तो चले जो भी तबाही हो गई है, जो अगली केपी साइड पर तबाही हो रही है, आई एम श्योर यू बिन टू द केपी साइड, अगर आप ऊपर पीसो हवा से क्रॉस करें वहां पर तो बिल्कुल ही लाइक हर पहाड़ की चोटी पर होटल्स, विलास, डेवलपमेंट, अभी एड्स भी आपको नजर आते हैं, वी कीप फॉर्मिंग द केपी गवर्नमेंट के, इट्स फॉरेस्ट एरिया एज वेल, मखनियाल का वो एरिया है और वहाँ रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट है, पर अनफॉर्चुनेटली बिकॉज ऑफ मिसहैंडलिंग और व्हाटएवर बहुत ज्यादा रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट पे लोगों ने कब्जा करके और उन्होंने प्रॉपर्टी प्राइवेट लैंड से लेकर तो दे आर डेवलपिंग, तो वो भी प्रॉब्लम है बिकॉज चले हम यहाँ तो बचा लेंगे बट देन वो गाड़ियां जाके गुजर के उस साइड पर जाएंगी तो you know it will be like soon you will have these 17,000 hectares surrounded by developed farmhouses, buildings, hotels. I mean it's our population is exploding and there's unfortunately, all these restaurants have made so much money. They've shown the way for others now, because now others want to also exploit the resource and वो पहले एक ज़माने में इतना quiet road होता था वहाँ पर और अब traffic से भरा होता है, and unfortunately most of it is going towards these. फिर दूसरी side पर Dino Valley बना लिया उन्होंने, जिनका बना लिया उन्होंने जाके Dino Valley बना लिया, वो भी उनके ऊपर I believe 3 FIRs हुई हैं उनके ऊपर KP side पर, फिर stay ले लेते हैं वो, तो it's when you are wealthy and powerful and connected in this country, तो आपको देखा है कि फिर courts भी खुल जाते हैं आपके लिए और आपको stays भी मिल जाते हैं, so it's right, I mean it's quite obvious. So but we as environmentalists, we have to fight, we have to do what we think is right and we can't give up. And like I said in the past, stone quarrying भी हमने खत्म कर दिया पार्ट में से, हमने वो टनल भी बंद करवा लिया था, वो शुरू नहीं करने दिया था, तो हमने एक बहुत मशहूर, आयशा को याद होगा, बहुत मशहूर केस था जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट तक गया था, पचाटा का, पचाटा रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट जो है मरी के करीब, that was the British had designated as a reserve forest and was continuing as a reserve forest. वहाँ पर किसी ने स्कीम बनाया था anyway it was a very famous case and it went to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court took a stand. Chaudhry Iftikhar Saab थे उस वक्त, I think he was the Chief Justice, and उन्होंने बंद कर दिया वो, हालांकि वो project बिल्कुल शुरू होने वाला था. They wanted to build hotel, golf course and develop this reserve forest. So we do have a precedent. It can happen if we try and we all get together and raise our voice.
I have a suggestion that if it's possible for you, you can't allow traffic to their tracks and just hiking is allowed.
जी हम करेंगे कोशिश, हमारी जब ये एक्ट पास हो जाएगा, we can have a proper visitor fee, we can try to discourage, फिर हमें control हो जाएगा उस सड़क पे. अभी right now we don't have control.
Thank you so much. I would like to request Dr. Abid Suleri, our Executive Director, for his closing remarks. And also, we are going to announce the winner for the poster competition that we organized 2 weeks ago. And we received almost 30+ entries from different universities all over Pakistan. And we have selected 2 winners this time because there was a draw. So the posters are also displayed there.
Good afternoon, dear students, honorable panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor यहाँ पे आप सबको बुलाना, आपकी मेजबानी करना और ये इतने अच्छा जो आर्ट वर्क है वो उसको हमें प्रमोट करने का मौका मिलेगा. लेकिन let me begin by thanking Rina साहिबा, नदीम, आयशा खान और इत्तिशाम, आपने ज्वाइन किया, आपने अर्थ डे के हवाले से जो कि यूनाइटेड नेशन ने इसको इंटरनेशनल मदर डे का नाम दिया है, मदर प्लैनेट का, उस पे आपने सरासर गुफ्तगू की. मैं देख रहा हूँ कि यहाँ पे चूंकि स्टूडेंट्स की तादाद ज्यादा है, मैं स्टूडेंट्स को थोड़ा सा इनवाइट करूंगा इसकी हिस्ट्री के बारे में, शुरू कैसे हुआ और हम कहाँ तक पहुंचे. 69 में अगर आपको याद हो तो एक ऑयल स्पिल हुआ था और उस ऑयल स्पिल के प्रोटेस्ट में जो था 1970 में अर्थ डे का आगाज हुआ कि सोचा गया कि the one common thing that we have is a planet Earth, और अगर उस पे कहीं पे कोई एक डिजास्टर आता है, कहीं पे कोई प्रॉब्लम आती है, तो it's not only that the localized incidents, whole of the world and whole of the planet has to suffer. But it's a collective responsibility to take rectifying measures. So that's how it started. और इसकी आज अगर हम देखते हैं तो importance मज़ीद बढ़ती चली जा रही है. Not only that environment and climate greenhouse gas emissions ये हम इसको negative side पे इसमें developments हो रही हैं, बल्कि इसलिए भी कि अब हमें बहुत clearly scientific evidence से पता चल रहा है कि it's not only an aesthetic issue, it's not only something जो कि आप समझे किसी ज़माने में कहा जाता था कि environmental issues जो है ये luxurious developed countries के issues हैं और शायद जो underdeveloped countries हैं, जो developing countries हैं, यहाँ पे poverty है, they need to tackle many of those issues first and then they have to think of environment. तो कहा जाता था कि ये भरे पेट की बातें हैं, लेकिन आज हमें ये पता चल रहा है कि ये खाली पेट भी इसीलिए है जब हम अपने environment पे, जब हम अपने natural resources पे compromise करते हैं. तो one of the तो उसका output और outcome आता है वो ये है कि वहाँ पे गुर्बत भी आती है, वहाँ पे underdevelopment भी होती है. सिर्फ उसकी छोटी सी मिसाल जो मैं आपको दे सकता हूँ जो environmental changes की वजह से आपको नजर आ रही है, that is वो wheat production. हमारी food security जो है वो wheat पे dependent है और इस साल मार्च में जो अनप्रेसिडेंटेड हीट वेव आई तो उसका नतीजा ये निकला कि गंदम का दाना जो है वो तो पक गया, लेकिन उसके कंटेंट्स जो हैं वो उस तरह से डेवलप नहीं हुए उसके अंदर जो कि होने चाहिए थे ग्रेन के. इट्स जस्ट लाइक ओवर फ्राइंग समथिंग. जब आप बहुत ज्यादा उसको ऑयल को गर्म कर लें और आप उसमें कुछ चीज फ्राई करने की कोशिश करें तो बाहर से तो राइप हो जाएगी लेकिन उसके अंदर कंटेंट्स जो है वो प्रॉपर नहीं होंगे. तो it's exactly the similar phenomenon happened with our wheat crop this year. और उससे ये हुआ कि गंदम पक गई, ब्राउन हो गई, लोगों ने हार्वेस्टिंग शुरू की, लेकिन जो इनिशियल रिपोर्ट्स आ रही हैं वो ये है कि द ग्रेन इज विदर्ड, तो उसके कंटेंट्स जो बनने चाहिए थे वो नहीं बन पाए. सो दिस इज जस्ट वन ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स कि अगर हम अपने एनवायरनमेंट का ख्याल नहीं कर रहे, अगर हम अपने क्लाइमेट का ख्याल नहीं कर रहे तो किस तरीके से चीजें जो है ये रिपल इफेक्ट है जो कि एक के बाद एक अफेक्ट करता जाता है. एंड insecurity breeds insecurity. So if we are insecure to any single phenomenon, तो वो automatically बाकी तमाम तरह की insecurities को वो lead करता जाएगा. So this Earth Day is a reminder that we have to contribute and play our role to secure this planet, to leave a livable planet for our future generations. और अगर हम यहाँ पे सिक्योरिटी ले आते हैं तो डेफिनेटली बाकी से जो चीजें हैं वाटर सिक्योरिटी, फूड सिक्योरिटी, हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, सोशल सिक्योरिटी, शायद उनके बारे में सोचना आसान हो जाए. लेकिन अगर हम वेट करते रहेंगे, इट्स नॉट ईदर और ऑप्शन कि आप पहले एक चीज को एड्रेस कर लें और फिर आप एनवायरनमेंट की तरफ आए. इट्स एंड ऑप्शन. और इस एंड में वन थिंग दैट इज कॉमन इज अवर planet, one thing that is common is our Earth. And on this third day and every day, this is just a reminder, but every day in our life we have to keep on struggling and striving to leave a secure planet. Thank you, Zainab or Team SDPI for convening it, and my heartfelt congratulations to the winner of today's competition.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abid. So now it's time to announce the winner. And as I mentioned earlier, we have two winners this time because of the draw. The posters are displayed there. The first winner is Mr. Ibrahim Afridi from Institute of Management Sciences. I think he has not joined us.
Yeah, we'll still clap for him.
Yeah. Second winner is Miss Mahrukh Sheikh from Fatma Jinnah Women University. Do we have any Mahrukh from? Okay, first poster belongs to Miss Mahrukh and the second poster is of Mr. Ibrahim.
That's invest in our planet.
Yes, that's Mahrukh's poster. And the second one is Mr. Ibrahim's poster. So the students have put great effort, and I think they deserve. Rest of the participants, it was so difficult to decide between the posters. Even at the last moment, we were working on, who to select as a winner. But all of you are a winner. You have invested your time and you have shared these entries. So certificates of participation will be awarded to all of you. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank our respected panelists for joining us today and for creating awareness about this very important subject, which is mostly neglected by so many people in the world. So thank you, Ms. Aisha Khan, Mr. Rehan and Mr. Nadeem for joining us today. Thank you so much.